December 4th, 6:40 in the morning, Midtown Manhattan. A powerful CEO steps out of a luxury hotel, heading to address investors. Seconds later, gunshots echo through the street. The shooter does not panic. He does not hesitate. He fires with precision and then vanishes into one of the most surveilled cities in the world. There is no robbery, no warning, no chaos. Just a message. And when investigators looked closer, they realized this was not random. It was planned. But the real question is, who wanted Brian Thompson dead and why? The killing of Brian Thompson did not just stun New York City, it sent shockwaves across the entire country. A 50-year-old CEO, the head of one of the largest health insurance companies in the United States, was gunned down in broad daylight outside a Manhattan hotel just moments before a scheduled investor conference. This was not a late-night crime in a dark alley. It happened during the morning rush in one of the busiest and most heavily monitored areas in the world. And according to police, it was not random. Officials quickly confirmed what many feared. This was a targeted, premeditated attack. The gunman knew exactly where to be, exactly when to strike, and exactly how to disappear. But what truly made this case explode across headlines was not just the murder itself. It was who Brian Thompson was. At the time of his death, he was facing mounting scrutiny, legal pressure, federal investigations, and tens of thousands of lawsuits tied to the company he led. Almost immediately, theories began to spread. Was this revenge, a corporate hit, or something even deeper meant to silence him? Online, the reaction was just as unsettling as the crime. As investigators searched for answers, one thing became clear. This case was not just about a murder. It was about power, controversy, and a motive that no one could yet fully explain. But to understand what happened on that cold December morning, we need to go back. Brian Thompson was not a public figure in the traditional sense. He was not a celebrity, and he did not seek attention. But inside the world of American healthcare, his name carried enormous weight. At 50 years old, Thompson was the CEO of UnitedHealthcare, part of UnitedHealth Group, widely described as the largest health insurer in the United States. A position like that comes with power and influence over billions of dollars and decisions that can impact millions of lives. To some, he was a successful executive at the top of his field. To others, he represented something far more controversial. At the time of his death, UnitedHealthcare was under intense scrutiny, particularly the elderly. Stories circulated of people struggling to get treatment approved, of families fighting insurance decisions, and of care delayed or denied. And whether fair or not, Thompson stood at the center of that storm. Behind the scenes, legal pressure was also building. According to documents, Thompson had allegedly sold 31% of his UnitedHealth stock, worth around $15.1 million, just months before a federal investigation into the company became public. That investigation, led by the Department of Justice, involved allegations of insider trading and antitrust violations. At the same time, investigators were examining the relationship between UnitedHealthcare's insurance arm and its Optum Health Services division, raising concerns about how patient diagnoses might affect government payments. It was a complicated and high-stakes environment. Corporate, legal, and financial, and increasingly public. Then there was the location. Midtown Manhattan's 6th Avenue, just outside the Hilton Hotel. One of the busiest areas in New York City, surrounded by offices, tourists, and constant surveillance. On the morning of December 4th, Thompson was there for a reason. He was scheduled to speak at an investor conference, a routine appearance, another day in a high-pressure career. Because at 6:40 a.m., as Brian Thompson stepped outside that hotel, someone was already waiting. And whatever led to that moment had been building long before he ever walked out those doors. December 4th, 2024. Midtown Manhattan was just beginning to wake up. It was 6:40 in the morning, early enough that the streets were not yet at full capacity, but busy enough that no one expected what was about to happen. Outside the Hilton Hotel on 6th Avenue, Brian Thompson stepped into the cold morning air. He was there for a routine obligation, an investor conference. There were no signs of danger, no visible threats, nothing to suggest that in a matter of seconds, everything would change. But someone else was already there, watching and waiting. According to investigators, the attack that followed was not spontaneous. It was calculated. As Thompson exited the hotel, the gunman moved in. There was no confrontation, no exchange of words, just gunfire. The shots rang out with precision, controlled and deliberate. Thompson was struck in the chest and the leg. The attack was fast, clinical, and then just as quickly as it began, it was over. In the middle of one of the most surveilled cities in the world, a man had just been gunned down in broad daylight. Emergency services rushed to the scene. Thompson was critically injured, but still alive. He was transported to Mount Sinai Hospital, sirens cutting through the morning traffic as first responders fought to keep him alive. But it was not enough. Moments later, he was pronounced dead. Back at the scene, chaos began to give way to questions. Because the shooter had not stuck around. He did not run blindly, and he did not panic. He escaped. According to police, the suspect fled the area on a bicycle, disappearing into the streets of Manhattan with a level of confidence that raised immediate concerns. Whoever this was, they knew what they were doing. Descriptions soon followed. Authorities identified the suspect as a white male wearing a cream-colored jacket, a black face mask, black and white sneakers, and carrying a gray backpack. But it was not just his appearance that stood out. Investigators revealed that the weapon used had a silencer, an uncommon and highly controlled accessory, especially in a place like New York. Witnesses noted something else. Another disturbing detail emerged. Bullet casings recovered at the scene had words carved into them: deny, defend, depose. 3. The New York Police Department made one thing clear. This was not random. This was a premeditated, pre-planned, targeted attack. As officers flooded the surrounding areas, the search began. A manhunt in a city filled with cameras, witnesses, and millions of people. Authorities offered a reward for information. Tips started coming in. Surveillance footage was reviewed. Every second of the suspect's movements became critical. And in the hours that followed, one question began to take shape. Not just who did this, but how someone could carry out such a precise public execution and walk away without a trace. In the immediate aftermath of the shooting, Midtown Manhattan transformed into an active crime scene. Police flooded the area, moving block by block, canvassing streets, securing surveillance footage, and interviewing anyone who might have seen something. From Rockefeller Center down to 47th Street, the search was intense. Because investigators were not just dealing with a homicide. They were dealing with a calculated assassination carried out in one of the most heavily monitored cities in the world. And yet, the suspect had disappeared. Authorities quickly confirmed what the evidence suggested. This was premeditated. Every detail pointed to planning, the timing, the location, the precision of the attack, and even the escape. According to police, the gunman fled on an unmarked e-bike, moving quickly through Manhattan before vanishing. As the manhunt expanded, investigators began piecing together the suspect's movements before the shooting. Surveillance images were released to the public. One showed a person of interest inside a hostel lobby, unmasked, wearing a hoodie, appearing calm and even smiling. Another image captured the suspect closer to the time of the attack, now concealed, dressed in a cream-colored jacket with his face covered and a gray backpack on his shoulders. It was the same person, but two very different presentations. Deliberate and controlled. Police believed the suspect had carefully prepared for this moment. Investigators then suspected that the gunman may have already left New York City. Evidence suggested he boarded a bus after the shooting, slipping out of the city before authorities could lock down all exit points. If true, it meant the window to catch him had narrowed quickly. Despite the scale of the investigation, there was still no name, no confirmed identity, just a trail of clues and a growing sense that this was no ordinary suspect. Meanwhile, the evidence collected at the crime scene continued to raise questions. The weapon used had a silencer, suggesting access, planning, and possibly experience. The bullet casings marked with deny, defend, depose raised questions about motive. Were they a message tied to the healthcare industry, a personal grievance, or something designed to mislead? At that stage, police made it clear they did not yet know. Behind the scenes, the investigation expanded in every direction. And then the internet got involved. Within hours, online communities began conducting their own investigations, analyzing surveillance photos, zooming in on clothing, speculating about the backpack, and debating the type of weapon used. Some focused on the suspect's behavior. Others tried to reconstruct his escape. To law enforcement, this attention was a double-edged sword. More eyes meant more potential leads, but also more misinformation. Investigators were flooded with tips, some useful, others misleading. Authorities urged caution and asked the public to report credible information through official channels. They continued to follow the evidence carefully, because despite all the noise, one thing remained unchanged. The suspect was still out there. At first, the case seemed straightforward, a targeted killing carried out with planning and precision. But as the investigation unfolded, the story began to shift. The twists did not come from law enforcement alone. They came from the public. The words on the bullet casings became a focal point. Many believed they were not just words, but a message tied directly to the healthcare industry. Online, a narrative began to form that this was not just an assassination, but a statement. Some believed it was revenge. Others speculated it was meant to silence him. None of it was confirmed, but the speculation spread rapidly. Then the tone changed. Instead of fear or sympathy dominating the conversation, something unexpected emerged: admiration. Some online communities began focusing on the suspect, analyzing his appearance, and even praising him. The reaction was unsettling. A public killing was being reframed by some as justified. Experts warned this was dangerous. Misinformation spread quickly, and there were concerns innocent people could be misidentified. The investigation risked being overwhelmed by false leads. Still, the noise continued, every clue debated, every theory explored. Meanwhile, police remained focused on the evidence. They avoided speculation and made it clear the truth had not yet been confirmed. But something had changed. This case was no longer just about a murder. It had become a cultural flashpoint. For days, the case existed in a storm of theories and speculation. Then investigators made a breakthrough. The man at the center of it all finally had a name: Luigi Mangione, a 26-year-old, Ivy League educated, from a prominent family in Baltimore. Not someone hiding in the shadows, but someone who did not fit the expected image. He was arrested in Altoona, Pennsylvania, at a McDonald's, just days after the shooting. The manhunt suddenly narrowed to a single individual. According to reports, Mangione was found carrying a handwritten document. Inside it was a statement that seemed to echo growing anger toward the healthcare industry. It did not confirm everything, but it pointed toward motive and intent. Combined with the evidence from the scene, the carved bullet casings, the calculated execution, and the planned escape, a picture began to form. This was intentional. But even with a suspect in custody, questions remained. The full story was still unfolding. In the end, the case reached a point where the facts were clear, but the outcome was not. Brian Thompson was gone, a 50-year-old executive and a father whose life ended on a Manhattan sidewalk. Tributes came from colleagues who described him as someone they respected deeply. At the same time, public reaction remained divided. Some expressed sympathy, while others focused on the controversy surrounding his company. It was a contrast that never fully resolved. Luigi Mangione, at 26 years old, stood at the center of one of the most high-profile murder cases in recent memory. He had been arrested, but the legal process was only beginning. There was no verdict, no conviction, and no final judgment. Support for the suspect continued in some circles, with fundraisers and public defenses emerging. At the same time, officials warned that violence cannot be justified, because beneath everything, one fact remained. A man had been killed, and another now faced the justice system. But until the courts decide, the final outcome remains unwritten. Brian Thompson's death left behind more than a crime scene. It left a divide. On one side, a family mourning and colleagues remembering a life that ended in seconds. On the other, anger and frustration toward a system many believe failed them. Somewhere in the middle is the truth, because this case was never just about a single act of violence. It became a reflection of how people see power and respond to injustice. But one reality remains clear. Violence does not resolve conflict. It does not fix broken systems. It only creates more questions. Why was Brian Thompson truly targeted? What drove someone to carry out such a calculated act? And how did a murder like this become something some people could justify? As the legal process continues, answers may come. But the impact of this case, the division and the reaction it sparked, may last far longer. Because in the end, this was not just a story about a CEO or a suspect. It was a story about a society under pressure, and what can happen when that pressure finally breaks.